I trusted her with my secrets, but I never thought she'd steal my husband with them. I used to believe that best friends were forever. She and I, let's call her Clara, shared more than laughter and coffee dates. We shared dreams, worries, even the quiet tears we never showed to anyone else. Clara was radiant in her own way, graceful, calm, always with that soothing smile that made me think no storm could ever break her spirit. I remember evenings when we would sit on my porch, the city lights twinkling in the distance, talking about our lives. She was like a sister to me, or so I told myself. I trusted her with stories I couldn't even tell my own husband. She listened without judgment, nodding softly, her hand often brushing mine as if to say, "You're not alone in this." At the time, I didn't realize how fragile my marriage was. My husband, let's call him Daniel, was kind, hardworking, but distant in ways I pretended not to see. He would come home late, his mind heavy with work, his words short and tired. Clara noticed before I did. One night, when Daniel left the dinner table early, Clara leaned closer to me, her voice gentle but pointed. "He seems far away lately. Are you two okay?" Her concern felt genuine, and maybe that was my first mistake. Letting her see too deeply into the cracks of my life. I confided in her. I told her about the silences, the unspoken aches, the way Daniel's eyes seemed to look past me. She didn't just listen. She comforted. Her palm rested over mine a moment longer than usual, her gaze holding mine with a softness that almost felt protective. Back then, I thought I was lucky to have a friend like her, someone who filled the empty spaces Daniel left behind. When I laughed with Clara, the air felt lighter. When I cried, she wiped the tears before they could stain my face. She carried me through storms without asking for anything in return. Or so it seemed. I never questioned her late-night calls to check on me. I never thought twice when she offered to help Daniel with his projects, since she understood his work better than I did. I even encouraged their conversations, thinking it was sweet of her to take an interest in him. Because why would I ever doubt her? She was my best friend, the one person I thought would never betray me. Looking back now, I see the signs I missed. The way Daniel lingered a second too long when she entered the room. The way her laughter grew softer, almost secretive, when it was just the two of them. But in that moment, all I felt was gratitude. I had no idea that the friend who held my hand through loneliness was slowly becoming the reason for it. It started with the smallest of things, the kind of moments you only notice when you look back and wonder how you missed them. At first, Clara's presence around Daniel felt harmless. She was my best friend, after all. Why would I ever suspect her? I remember the first time I saw it clearly, though at that moment I dismissed it as nothing. We were in the kitchen after dinner. Daniel was rinsing the plates, and Clara leaned against the counter, sipping her wine. The warm yellow light from the chandelier painted everything in a cozy glow. I was at the table, folding napkins absent-mindedly, and I caught the way her eyes lingered on him as he rolled up his sleeves. It was brief, just a flicker of something unspoken, but I felt it. A softness in her gaze, a curve of her lips that wasn't meant for me. I shook it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Clara was simply kind, and Daniel was just being polite. That was all. But as the weeks passed, I noticed more. The way her laughter was a touch louder when he made a joke. The way Daniel, usually withdrawn after long workdays, suddenly seemed more awake, more alive when she was near. It was in the small courtesies, the way he would pour her an extra glass of wine without asking, or how she would straighten his tie before we went out, her hands brushing just a little too close to his chest. And then there were the silences. That's what truly unnerved me. When the three of us were together, there were moments when their conversation would dip into quiet, an exchange of glances I wasn't part of, a shared smile that ended too quickly when I looked their way. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I told myself Clara was helping, filling in where I could not. She and Daniel shared an understanding of his work, his pressures. I told myself I was lucky to have a best friend who cared so much, and a husband who appreciated her kindness. But late at night, when the house was quiet and I lay awake beside Daniel's steady breathing, doubt crept in. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. My own laughter with Clara felt different now, tinged with suspicion I couldn't admit. Even when she brushed my hair back gently, like she always did when I was upset, I felt a chill. Was her comfort still pure, or was it guilt hidden beneath tenderness? I started watching them more closely, though I tried to hide it. I memorized the way Daniel's hand brushed hers when passing a dish, the way her eyes lit up when he walked into the room. Each detail built a quiet storm inside me, one I tried to silence with denial. But deep down, a truth was beginning to take shape. A truth I wasn't ready to face. Something between them had shifted, and I was the only one pretending not to see it. It's strange how breaking points are never sudden. They come like water against stone, each drop insignificant, until the crack finally forms. For me, that crack appeared one Saturday evening, during what should have been an ordinary night. Clara had come over to help me prepare for a small dinner gathering. She moved around the kitchen as though it were her own home, chopping vegetables, seasoning dishes with a confidence that both impressed and unsettled me. Daniel came in halfway, freshly showered, his hair damp, the faint smell of his cologne carrying through the air. I watched the way Clara's face softened when she noticed him. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. And Daniel's smile was different. Not the weary, distracted smile he usually gave me after a long day, but one that reached his eyes. The air shifted in that kitchen, and I felt like a stranger standing in my own life. Later that evening, as guests filled the dining room, laughter and clinking glasses covered the quiet exchanges between them. But my eyes caught everything. The way Clara leaned in a little closer than necessary when Daniel poured her wine. The way his hand lingered just a fraction too long on her shoulder as he passed behind her. These weren't the gestures of strangers, nor even of simple friends. They were signals, small, hidden, but undeniable once seen. I tried to hold myself together, tried to smile and play the gracious host. But my chest ached with every second. I felt invisible. Worse than invisible, I felt replaced. When the last guest finally left, I excused myself to the bedroom, my hands trembling as I changed out of my dress. I thought maybe I could swallow the feeling, bury it deep and pretend again. But when I returned, I found them still in the kitchen, alone, the last of the wine between them. Clara laughed softly, her hand brushing Daniel's as she took the glass. The sound pierced me like glass shattering. It wasn't just laughter. It was intimacy, belonging, something I thought was mine. Enough, I whispered, though my voice shook. They both turned, startled, as though caught in a flame they weren't ready to admit existed. Daniel's brow furrowed, Clara's lips parted, words dying before they left her mouth. "Do you think I don't see it?" I asked, my voice louder now, raw with a hurt I could no longer hide. "The looks, the touches, the way you come alive when she's here. Do you think I'm blind?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Clara's eyes filled with something, guilt, sorrow, maybe even love. Daniel lowered his gaze, unable to meet mine. That silence told me everything I needed to know. The ground beneath me seemed to give way. My best friend, my husband, two people I trusted most in the world, and I was standing outside of a bond one was never meant to witness. The breaking point wasn't rage, as I always imagined it would be. It was grief, silent, suffocating, absolute, and in that moment, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. Confrontations are never neat. They're not rehearsed speeches or tidy endings. They're raw, jagged, and almost always leave scars. That night, after the breaking point in the kitchen, I felt something inside me ignite, a mixture of grief and fury that demanded to be heard. I stood there, staring at the two people I loved most, waiting for either of them to deny what I already knew. For someone to say, "You're wrong, you're imagining things." But no one did. The silence stretched like a blade between us, and it cut deeper with every passing second. Finally, Clara spoke. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice trembling. But even as she said it, her eyes betrayed her. She couldn't hold my gaze, couldn't summon the kind of conviction that might have convinced me. I let out a bitter laugh. Not what I think. Then tell me, Clara, what exactly is it that I'm seeing? Because from where I stand, it looks like the two of you forgot I exist. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well, his nervous tell. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. We didn't mean for this to go this far. I felt the words like blows. We didn't mean for this to go this far. That was an admission, a confession wrapped in cowardice. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in as tears burned my eyes. I remembered the countless nights Clara had comforted me when Daniel and I fought. The way she'd say, "You deserve someone who sees you." Now I realized she had been looking at him the entire time. "You were my best friend," I said, my voice cracking, the weight of betrayal tightening around my chest. "You knew everything. My fears, my insecurities, the cracks in my marriage. And instead of protecting me, you used them." Clara's face crumpled, shame flooding her expression. "I didn't plan it, I swear. But she hesitated, her voice breaking. "I fell for him, and I can't pretend I didn't." Daniel reached for me then, as though touch could bridge a canyon that had already opened wide. I stepped back, shaking my head. His hands, once my place of comfort, now felt foreign, tainted. "Don't," I whispered, my throat raw. "You don't get to touch me. Not after this." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. My mind raced with memories. Our wedding vows, our anniversaries, the laughter of shared moments. All of it now shadowed by this revelation. "I trusted you both," I said, my voice steadier now, though the ache inside me grew sharper. "And you chose each other over me." No one answered. There was nothing left to say. The betrayal hung thick in the air, undeniable and irreversible. In that moment, I felt the full weight of loss. Not just of my marriage, but of the friendship I thought would last a lifetime. The life I knew had ended, and a new, unbearable reality had begun. The hours after a confrontation are the hardest. The storm may have passed, but the wreckage is everywhere, and you're left to walk barefoot across the shards. That night, after their confessions, the house felt unbearably still. Clara had left, her perfume still lingering faintly in the air like an uninvited ghost. Daniel sat on the far side of the bed, his head buried in his hands, but the distance between us felt like miles of empty space. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried, leaving behind a hollow ache that was far worse. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding in rhythms that reminded me I was still alive, even if I wished I wasn't. Every corner of the room felt contaminated with memories. Our framed wedding photo on the dresser, the blanket Clara once gifted us draped over the chair. Everything seemed to mock me now. Daniel finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I almost laughed. Sorry. Such a small word for such a massive wound. "You didn't just hurt me, Daniel," I whispered, my throat tight. "You broke me. And the worst part? You let her help you do it." He reached out, but I flinched. I couldn't bear the thought of his touch. It felt like fire, but not the kind that warms. The kind that scorches. I needed distance. The next day, I wandered through the house like a ghost. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's dinner, though no one had an appetite. My phone buzzed endlessly. Missed calls, unread messages from Clara. I couldn't bring myself to open them. I knew what they'd say. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me. You mean so much to me." But those words had lost their weight. The loneliness crept in quickly. It wasn't just the absence of love, but the absence of trust. To lose both at once is to feel untethered, as though the world no longer has a place for you. At one point, I walked into the bathroom and caught my reflection. My eyes were swollen, my face pale. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked older, weaker, like someone who had lived through a war. And maybe I had. When Daniel came home from work, the silence between us was suffocating. He tried to act normal, asking if I had eaten, if I needed anything. I wanted to scream at him, to demand how he could pretend life hadn't collapsed. But instead I said nothing. My silence was its own weapon, sharper than words. That night, alone in the dark, I realized the cruelest truth. Betrayal doesn't just take away the people you love. It takes away the version of yourself that believed in them. I could never be that woman again. And so, in the quiet aftermath, a new question began to form, one that scared me almost as much as the betrayal itself. What happens next, when the life you built no longer exists? Choices don't always come in the form of bold declarations. Sometimes they slip in quietly, in the quiet hours when the world is still, and you realize you can no longer ignore the fork in your path. That's where I found myself, standing in the ruins of my marriage, torn between the pieces of my old life and the frightening blank canvas of what might come next. Days had passed since the confrontation. Each morning, Daniel tried in small ways to mend what couldn't be mended. Brewing my coffee just the way I liked it, placing a hand on my shoulder as though the gesture could erase the memory of his hand on Clara's. I felt the desperation in him, but it rang hollow. Every kindness was a reminder of what he had broken. One evening, he finally spoke the words he had been holding back. "I'll end it with her. I'll cut her out completely. Please, just don't give up on us." The plea echoed inside me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to cling to the familiarity of the man I once trusted. I thought about the years we had built together, the dreams we once whispered late at night, the version of us that had existed before Clara entered the picture. Could I really throw all of that away? But another voice inside me, quieter yet stronger, whispered the truth. Trust, once shattered, never returns whole. Even if he left Clara, even if we tried again, would I ever stop wondering? Would I ever stop watching the way his eyes shifted when another woman laughed in his presence? That doubt would poison me, and it would poison us. Clara, too, tried to reach out. She wrote long messages, begging me to talk, telling me she hadn't meant to fall in love with him, that she still loved me as her friend. I read them once, then deleted them all. Forgiveness might be noble, but forgetting was impossible. And every word she wrote felt like salt rubbed into wounds that had barely begun to scab. The weight of the choice pressed on me each day. Forgive and live in constant suspicion. Fight and chain myself to a broken love. Or leave and face the terrifying unknown. One night, I sat by the window long after Daniel had fallen asleep. The moonlight spilled across the floor, and in that fragile light, clarity finally came. I realized I could no longer build my life around people who had betrayed me. My heart deserved more than scraps of regret and empty promises. And though walking away terrified me, staying felt like a slow death. So I made the choice not out of anger, not even out of hatred, but out of love for myself. For the woman I still was beneath the heartbreak. I chose to leave. Endings are rarely as final as they seem. They don't slam shut like doors. They drift into place, quietly, like a curtain falling at the end of a play. That's how it felt when I left Daniel. Not a storm, not a blaze of anger, just a weary kind of peace that comes when you finally stop fighting for something already lost. I packed slowly, methodically, folding pieces of my life into suitcases. Each shirt, each book, each framed photograph felt like a decision. What to carry forward, and what to leave behind. I didn't take everything. Some things belonged to the life we had built together, and that life was over. Daniel watched, silent, standing in the doorway. His face carried regret, but regret was not enough to build a future on. There were no more apologies left that could fill the space between us. He tried once more, his voice low. "Are you sure this is what you want?" I looked at him then, not as my husband, not as the man I once dreamed forever with, but as a stranger. A stranger who had loved me once, and failed me in the end. "It's not what I want," I said softly, "but it's what I need." Leaving wasn't easy. The first nights alone were brutal, silence echoing louder than any fight, the absence of familiar footsteps down the hall, the empty half of the bed a reminder of everything I'd lost. Grief clung to me like a second skin, and there were moments I thought I might drown in it. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the grief began to shift. It didn't vanish, it never does, but it softened, making room for something else. Space. Possibility. I began to reclaim myself in small ways. Morning walks where I let the sunlight warm my face. Cooking meals just for me. Savoring the taste of freedom even when it was seasoned with loneliness. Calling old friends I had neglected, not to talk about the pain, but to remind myself that life still existed outside of betrayal. And then there were the moments of unexpected strength. The day I laughed at something silly on TV and realized it was the first genuine laugh in weeks. The day I woke up and, for a split second, forgot the weight of what had happened. The day I looked in the mirror and didn't see a broken woman, but someone surviving. Clara's messages eventually stopped. Daniel didn't call anymore. Their absence no longer cut me. It freed me. The silence that once suffocated me now became a sanctuary. I won't pretend it was easy, or that I emerged without scars. But I learned that endings are also beginnings in disguise. That sometimes the bravest act of love is choosing yourself, even when it means walking away from those you thought you could never live without. And as I stood one morning on my small balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise spill gold across the sky, I felt it for the first time in months. Hope, not for him, not for her, but for me, because this was my new beginning. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more real-life love and betrayal stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Broken Heart Sparkles, your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life, because every story deserves to be heard. L7